My work and research is leading me down the path of uncovering how the new historical narrative was created and implemented, and the process of how the original history was deconstructed and reconstructed into a new narrative. By following money and influence, the true picture of what has taken place here emerges. My name is Michelle Gibson. Up until relatively recently, we were on the very positive and advanced human timeline of the ancient Moorish civilization, and the true history of Earth and humanity was nothing like what we had been taught. The hiding of this ancient advanced civilization in plain sight was accomplished by shaping the false narrative, educating us in it, and reinforcing it with images coming from Hollywood, literature, art. It is not supposed to be there, so we don't see it. We don't even think it. Yet the existing infrastructure on the Earth was incredibly similar in diverse places. Here are a few of countless examples of massive and perfectly geometrically aligned masonry infrastructure. The Fort de la Bastille at Grenoble in southern France. Fort Jefferson on Dry Tortugas State Park, west of Key West in the Florida Keys, only accessible by ferry or boat, and the largest brick masonry structure with 16 million bricks in the United States, said to have been built between 1845 and 1861. The Cisternerne, or cisterns, in Copenhagen, Denmark, and the Basilica Cistern, the largest of several hundred ancient cisterns that lie beneath Istanbul in Turkey. So how were we put and kept asleep? Since this is a big, multi-layered subject, I'm going to focus on who was behind intentional creation and promotion of addictions and distractions, and on the origins of companies and corporations. Why on earth would we be kept addicted and distracted? There are several reasons, but the main reason is negative beings don't want us to know who we really are and why we are here. Each human being is a living hologram of the universe, and our sole purpose of existence is to ultimately reunite spiritually with our higher selves, which is what the Moors were doing here before the hijack. The parasitic and multidimensionally aware beings behind all of this want us to believe that suffering, sickness, misery, destruction, and death was and is our normal state of being, and not question what we have been taught about who we are. They are the only ones who benefit because they energetically feed on humanity's negative emotional states. Additionally, they have manipulated human beings to become the perpetrators of negativity and depravity against fellow human beings. Horrific crimes against and abuse of humanity has taken place at unimaginable levels because it has been deeply hidden by those behind it, who fear the great awakening of humanity. I'm going to begin with addictions. An addiction is a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful effects. My starting point will be John Molson. I came across him a while back when I was researching railroads. John Molson was born in England in 1763. He became a brewer and entrepreneur in colonial Quebec and Lower Canada. In addition to being given the credit for financing the first public railway in Canada, the Champlain and St. Lawrence Railway, chartered in 1832 and built in 1835, he founded the Molson Brewery in 1786 in Montreal, financed the first steamship built in North America in 1809, the Accommodation, and was president of the Bank of Montreal. John Molson was said to have been orphaned at the age of 8, when first his father died, then his mother 2 years later. He lived with various guardians until he left England for Montreal, Quebec in 1782 at the age of 18. This is a 1761 map of the Isles of Montreal. After his arrival in Montreal, he moved in with a brewer, Thomas Lloyd, and shortly thereafter became a partner of the brewery. At the age of 21, he took over the brewery completely. Soon Molson's beer was in high demand, which was said to have appealed to different classes of Montreal society, with customers increasing every day. Between 1788 and 1800, his business quickly grew into one of the larger ones in Lower Canada, having sold 30,000 gallons, or 113,500 liters of beer by 1791. As his wealth grew, he started branching out into financing other interests, like the railroad and the steamship. He was appointed the Provincial Grand Master of the District Freemasonic Lodge of Montreal by the Duke of Sussex in 1826, a position he held for 5 years before resigning in 1831. He died in 1836 and was interred in the Molson Mausoleum in Montreal's Mount Royal Cemetery. The Anheuser-Busch Brewing Company is headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. This is a postcard of it from the 1930s. Today, the company employs over 30,000 people and operates 12 breweries in the United States. The Busch Entertainment Corporation, which was founded in 1959, became SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment in 2009 with its sale to the Blackstone Group, an American multinational private equity, asset management, and financial services firm based in New York City. It was founded as the Bavarian Brewery in 1852 by George Snyder, but financial problems forced him to sell the brewery to various owners during the late 1850s, one of which was Eberhard Anhauser, a prosperous German-American soap and candle maker. The name became E. Anheuser and Company in 1860. A wholesaler who had immigrated from Germany to St. Louis in 1857, Adolphus Busch, became Eberhard Anhauser's son-in-law in 1861. He was the 21st of 22 children in a family that did well financially, selling winery and brewery supplies in Mainz-Kastel in Wiesbaden, in Germany's state of Hesse. We are told that after serving in the Union Army during the American Civil War for 6 months, Adolphus Busch returned to St. Louis and began working for the brewery. Soon he became a partner and served as company secretary until his father-in-law died in 1880, at which time he became president of the business. During the 1870s, Adolphus Busch had toured Europe to study changes in brewing methods at the time. In particular, he was interested in the Pilsner beer of the town of Budweis, located in what is now the Czech Republic. In 1876, he introduced Budweiser, and 1876 was the same year he introduced refrigerated railroad cars to transport beer. By 1877, the company owned a fleet of 40 refrigerated railroad cars. Expanding the company's distribution range led to increased demand for their products, and the company expanded its facilities in St. Louis during the 1870s. Busch implemented pasteurization in 1878 as a way to keep beer fresh for a longer period of time, and also established the St. Louis Refrigerator Car Company in 1878, and by 1888, the company owned 850 cars. In addition to refrigeration and pasteurization, Busch adopted vertical integration as a business practice, in which he bought all of the components of his business, from bottling factories to ice manufacturing plants, to buying the rights from Rudolph Diesel to manufacture all diesel engines in America. This illustration was of the Bevo bottling facility in St. Louis. He also founded the Manufacturers Railway Company in 1887, which operated until 2011. Adolphus Busch died in 1913, with a net worth of $60 million in U.S. dollars at the time of his death. I couldn't find any information showing that Adolphus Busch was a Freemason like I did John Molson, but I did find this goat mug that was made in 1994 by Anheuser-Busch for the Freemasons of the Rio Negrinho in Brazil, featuring a lifelike goat head and the Brazilian words for liberty, equality, and fraternity inscribed in the base. What about the founding of distilleries during this same time period? Let's take a look at Jack Daniel's. Jack Daniel's is a brand of Tennessee whiskey and the top-selling American whiskey in the world. Jasper Newton Jack Daniel was born sometime in the mid-1800s. The birth date of 1850 was on his tombstone. However, his birth date was said to be listed as September 5, 1846, in Tennessee state records from the time. He was the youngest of 10 children, and his mother died shortly after he was born. When his father died in the Civil War, he ran away from home because he didn't get along with his stepmother. He was taken in by the local lay preacher and distiller, Dan Call, and began to learn the distilling trade. Daniel was said to have received an inheritance from his father's estate after a long dispute with his siblings was resolved, and he founded a legally registered distilling business with Call in 1875. Shortly afterwards, Call was said to have quit for religious reasons, and Daniel purchased the hollow and land the distillery was on in Lynchburg, Tennessee, after taking over the distillery in 1884. Alcohol is classified as a central nervous system depressant, meaning that it slows down brain function and neural activity. Alcohol proof is the measure of the percentage of content of ethanol in an alcoholic beverage. We're talking 70 proof and over for the hard liquor products made by the Jack Daniel's distillery. Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey was said to have had a surge in popularity after receiving the gold medal for the finest whiskey at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, also known as the Louisiana Purchase Exposition, to celebrate the centennial of the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. Interesting to note that Adolphus Busch was on the board of directors for the 1904 exposition in St. Louis. Like with Adolphus Busch, when I looked, I couldn't find anything about Jack Daniel being a Freemason, but I did find some interesting connections between Freemasons and his whiskey. One was a limited edition commemorative bottle of Jack Daniel's single barrel whiskey, bottled exclusively for American Freemasons. And the other thing I found was a rare Jack Daniel whiskey Freemasonic watch, complete with skull and bones in between the compass and the square, underneath the cover of it, that the information is no longer available for on the website where one was auctioned off. But another Canadian poor orphan boy made good, distiller Joseph E. Seagram, was a confirmed Freemason. Born in 1841 in what is now Cambridge, Ontario, his parents died when he was a child, and he and his brothers were said to have been raised by clergy. He received education at a business college and eventually learned about the distilling process at Waterloo Distillery, and ultimately bought out other owners to become the full owner and renamed it Seagram's. His 1907 creation of VO whiskey became the largest selling Canadian whiskey in the world. Seagram was at one time senior warden of the Grand River Lodge No. 151 in what is now Kitchener, Ontario, which was previously known as Berlin. What are some other profitable addictions? One would be cigarettes. R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company was founded in 1875 by R.J. Reynolds, born in 1850, and the son of a tobacco farmer in Virginia. Reynolds sold his shares in his father's tobacco company and went to Winston-Salem in North Carolina to start his own company, the closest town with a railroad connection. The first year he produced 150,000 pounds, or 68,000 kilograms of tobacco, and by the 1890s, he was producing several millions of pounds and kilograms. We are told the company's buildings were the largest in Winston-Salem and had the new technologies of steam power and electric lights. Interesting to note the brick factory building on the previous illustration of the R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company's physical plant on the top, with the depiction of what looks like a wooden log cabin style building in this coin commemorating the company's first 100 years on the bottom, as well as the mud-flooded appearance of the top depiction with the slanted street and ground level windows. Prince Albert smoking tobacco became the company's national showcase product in 1907, which led to high-profile advertising in Union Square in New York City. R.J. Reynolds' Camel cigarette became the most popular cigarette in the country. 5 of the company's brands are in the top 10 of the best-selling brands in the United States, and it is estimated that every 1 out of 3 cigarette brands sold in the United States is a product of R.J. Reynolds. Yet another way to profit from addictions would be gambling. What in the world could make people from all walks of life willfully throw money away by playing the odds, with nothing guaranteed in return? A great case study of this phenomena is Las Vegas, Nevada. Between the late 1800s and early 1900s, gambling was brought to the area now known as Las Vegas, which was founded in 1905 as a stopover for Union Pacific trains traveling between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. The oldest casino in Las Vegas was the Hotel Nevada on Fremont Street. It opened in 1906 and then in 1909 had to be closed as a casino due to a gambling ban that was introduced in Nevada. The casino was reopened in 1931 when the ban was lifted. Fremont Street was named after John C. Fremont, an American explorer who led 5 expeditions to explore the West in the 1840s, and he came through the Las Vegas area in 1844. The Hotel Nevada became the Golden Gate Hotel and Casino in 1955. It was renovated over the years and operates to this day. The El Cortez Hotel and Casino was built in 1941 and was the first major resort in downtown Las Vegas, also located on Fremont Street. The El Rancho Vegas was also built in 1941 and was the first casino hotel in the area that became known as the Vegas Strip. The main buildings of El Rancho Vegas, including the casino and restaurants, were destroyed by fire in 1960. The El Rancho Motor Inn operated as a non-gaming hotel until the remaining buildings were completely demolished by 1979. The Golden Nugget opened in 1946 and was the first standalone casino in Las Vegas. At that time, it was the flashiest and biggest casino in the world. The Flamingo opened in Las Vegas the day after Christmas in 1946 and is the oldest hotel on the Vegas Strip still standing. The man behind the idea of the flamingo was Billy Wilkerson, founder of the Hollywood Reporter magazine. Along with mobster Bugsy Siegel, Wilkerson wanted to build a casino that would trap gamblers and keep them playing for hours. For example, having no clocks or windows in the casino to facilitate people losing track of time. To this day, Las Vegas is nicknamed the city that never sleeps. So how else were we put and kept asleep? Another way was by distractions. A distraction is a thing that prevents someone from giving full attention to something else. I'm going to start off this subject with the distraction of movies. The breakthrough of projected cinematography, meaning pertaining to the art or technique of motion picture photography, was regarded as a public screening of 10 of the Lumiere brothers' short films in Paris on December 28th of 1895. Interestingly, the French word lumière means light. Shortly thereafter, film production companies and studios were established all over the world. One of the first cinemas was said to have opened in Petropolis, Brazil in 1897, showing the Lumiere brothers' first films. Petropolis is the name of a German colonized mountain town 42 miles or 68 kilometers north of Rio de Janeiro. Interesting looking edifice and intriguing blue glow of this steeple in Petropolis. The American Mutoscope and Biograph Company, also known as Biograph, was founded by William Kennedy Dixon in 1895. The firm got its start in the mutoscope business, which made flip card movies. Biograph was in competition to Edison's kinetoscope for individual peep shows. Biograph was the first company in the U.S. to devote itself to film production and exhibition, and in the course of 2 decades, released over 3,000 short films and 12 feature films. It was the most prominent film studio during the silent film era. Hollywood, a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California, became the center of the American film industry from New York, apparently in the early 1900s when the film industry was getting its start. Most motion picture patents were held by the Edison Motion Picture Patents Company in New Jersey, and independent filmmakers were often sued or threatened to stop their productions. So they moved out west to Los Angeles, where Edison's patents could not be enforced. The film industries of Europe were devastated during World War I, and the filmmakers of Hollywood became the most popular in the world by replacing the French and Italian firms that were devastated by the war. Silent film producer, director, screenwriter, and actor Thomas Ince was known as the father of the Western and made over 800 films. Ince established his first movie studio, Bison Film Company, in 1909 in Edendale, a once historic district in Los Angeles that was the home of most major studios on the West Coast in the silent film era, that was located where Echo Park and Silver Lake are today and doesn't exist anymore. Within a few years of arriving in California, Thomas Ince established his first major movie studio on land in the Santa Monica Mountains and the Palisades Highland. Known as Inceville, it was the first full-service movie studio of its kind, and Ince was credited with revolutionizing the movie industry by creating the first major Hollywood studio. In 1911, Ince introduced the system of assembly line filmmaking and reorganized how films were outputted, with weekly output increasing from 1 to 3 reels per week, which were written, produced, cut, assembled, and finished all within a week. Inceville became the prototype for Hollywood film studios of the future. In 1915, real estate mogul Harry Culver convinced Thomas Ince to come to what became Culver City and form a partnership with D.W. Griffith and Max Sennett in what became known as a Triangle Motion Picture Company. Though the Triangle Company was already defunct after only 7 years, by 1922, it was one of the first vertically integrated film companies. Production, distribution, and theater operations were combined under one roof, and it became the most dynamic studio in Hollywood, attracting stars and directors of the day, including Mary Pickford, Lillian Gish, Fatty Arbuckle, and Douglas Fairbanks Sr. In 1924, the Triangle Studio location became Lot 1 of the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios, and is a location of the Sony Pictures Studio today. Thomas Ince died suddenly, at the height of his career, after having been a private party guest on board the yacht of William Randolph Hearst, with his cause of death attributed to acute indigestion. Another pioneer of the motion picture industry was Marcus Loew. He founded Loew's Theaters in 1904, the oldest theater chain operating in the United States until it merged with AMC Theaters in 2006, and he was the founder of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios in 1924. Another poor young man made good. He was born into a poor Jewish family in New York City. His parents were immigrants from Austria and Germany. He had to work from a young age and had little formal education. We are told he was able to save enough money from menial jobs to buy into the penny arcade business as his first business investment. It is important to note that the birth of the viable interactive entertainment industry in 1972 resulted from the coin-operated entertainment business, which had well-developed manufacturing and distribution channels around the world, and computer technology that had become cheap enough to incorporate into mass-market entertainment products. The year of 1972 that Magnavox released the world's first home video game console, the Magnavox Odyssey. And while there were other less well-known video arcade games released around 1972, the first blockbuster video arcade game was Space Invaders, responsible in 1978 for starting what is called the golden age of video arcade games. So there is a direct connection through time between penny arcade games and video arcade games, another distraction, addiction, and big money maker, usually found in movie theaters, no less. Not long after buying into the penny arcade business, Lowe purchased a Nickelodeon in partnership with Adolf Zukor. A Nickelodeon was a type of indoor exhibition space dedicated to showing projected motion pictures. His first Nickelodeon partner, Adolf Zukor, was one of the founders of Paramount Pictures, which was formed in 1912. Marcus Lowe formed the People's Vaudeville Company in 1904, which showcased one-reel films and live variety shows. Vaudeville was a type of entertainment popular chiefly in the United States early in the 20th century, featuring a mix of specialty acts such as burlesque comedy, song, and dance. Burlesque is a style in literature and drama that mocks or imitates a subject by representing it in an ironic or ludicrous way. Human degradation was going on here, as opposed to learning ways to expand into self-awareness and higher consciousness. In 1910, Marcus Lowe expanded to become Lowe's Consolidated Enterprises with Adolf Zukor, Joseph Schenck, and Nicholas Schenck. In addition to theaters, Marcus Lowe and the Schenck brothers expanded the Fort George amusement park in Upper Manhattan. Fort George was located at the end of the 3rd Avenue trolley line and was said to have developed as a trolley park around 1894. Joseph and Nicholas Schenck were said to have been Russian immigrants who opened a beer hall at Fort George Amusement Park in 1905, and they formed a partnership with Marcus Lowe to expand rides and vaudeville shows there. The red arrows are pointing to the masonry banks of the Harlem River. This trolley park suffered extensive damage from a fire in 1913, reportedly from arson. It was not rebuilt, and in 1914, many of the remaining amusements were destroyed, albeit with some concessionaires continuing to hold on to their stands for a while. By 1913, Marcus Lowe operated a large number of the theaters in diverse places, not only in New York, but also in New Jersey, Washington, D.C., Boston, and Philadelphia. I first came across Marcus Lowe in Jersey City, New Jersey, in the form of the landmark Lowe's Jersey Theater, said to have opened in 1929. A fully preserved theater, it is as lavish on the outside as it is on the inside. Preservationists succeeded in saving the building from demolition after it closed in 1986. It is used for special events and is the primary venue of the annual Golden Door Film Festival since 2011. Here's the thing. Most of the historic Lowe's theaters did not survive very long. Lowe's Theater on the far eastern end of Canal Street in Manhattan, said to date from 1927, had the fate of abandonment. It was only in operation as one of Lowe's theaters until the 1960s. It became an indie film theater until it closed for good by 1980 and was abandoned. There has been an effort to restore some parts of the Lowe's Canal Street Theater since 2010, but why let a beautiful structure like this go to ruin in the first place? Another example is Lowe's 46th Street Theater in Brooklyn, said to have been taken over by Lowe's Company in 1928 and operating until 1966. It was taken over by Brandt Theaters and operated by this company from 1966 to 1969. It reopened as the 46th Street Rock Palace in 1969, presenting concerts, and closed as a theater and concert hall for good in 1973. It was converted into retail space as a furniture store until 2015, at which time the furniture store moved, and this former theater was converted into apartments. There are many more examples. These were not the exception. These examples were the rule for these beautiful old theaters. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, also known as MGM, was founded in 1924 when Marcus Lowe gained control of Metro Pictures, Goldwyn Pictures, and Louis B. Mayer Pictures. Besides having big-name stars of the day for more sophisticated feature films like Greta Garbo, Joan Crawford, Spencer Tracy, and Clark Gable, MGM Studios also released the shorts and features produced by the Hal Roach Company, like Laurel and Hardy, and Our Gang, a series of short films following a group of poor neighborhood children and their adventures. So instead of movie studios using the powerful medium of film for the upliftment and improvement of humanity, generations of adults and children had their brains filled with things like slapstick comedy. In 1973, MGM Resorts International was formed, a hotel and casino company based in Las Vegas. It was a division of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios until 1986, so this movie studio was tied into the lucrative gambling addiction industry as well. Movies, gambling, and alcohol became the centerpieces of entertainment in modern culture, and industries like these are making millions upon millions off of an unaware public that has been immersed in the intentional promotion of consumerism, a social and economic order that encourages an acquisition of goods and services in ever increasing amounts. This made me think of the introduction of the credit card to facilitate consumerism. Diners Club was the first, issuing its charge card in 1950. And American Express and the Bank of America followed in 1958. Another spin-off from the movie industry, and another way to immerse the general public in the idolatry of Hollywood, was the development of action figures and other collectibles related to popular movies and characters. The first movie action figure was produced by A.C. Gilbert in 1964 and was based on the James Bond movie Goldfinger. And of course, there's Walt Disney's ubiquitous Mickey Mouse. There are two subjects I would like to bring up before I move on to other distractions. The first is Midtown Atlanta's Fox Theater. This is definitely Moorish architecture. Construction of it as a large shrine temple was said to have started in 1928, but the $2.75 million project soon exceeded their budget, so the project was said to have been leased to movie mogul William Fox. The Fox Theater opened in 1929, 2 months after the stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. The theater closed 125 weeks after it opened. New owners acquired it, Paramount Pictures and Georgia-based Lucas and Jenkins, after the mortgage was foreclosed in 1932. This is the interior of the Fox Theater. And on the left is a detail of the Fox Theater stage in Atlanta, of the Mabel Tainter Memorial Theater stage in Menominee, Wisconsin in the middle, and a detail on the right of the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, the only place acknowledged to have had a Moorish civilization. Everywhere else, the Moors and their ancient, advanced, and worldwide civilization has been removed from the historical record. The other subject I would like to bring up are famous actors who were Shriners, an order established within Freemasonry in 1870 and comprised of 32nd and 33rd degree Freemasons, the two highest degrees in Western Freemasonry. This is not by any means an all-inclusive list of famous actors and entertainers who were also Shriners. Clark Gable, Ernest Borgnine, Glenn Ford, John Wayne, the voice of Bugs Bunny, Mel Blanc, Red Skelton, and Roy Rogers. Moorish Masonry has 360 degrees. This is what all of this, every bit of what has taken place here, is really all about. The other distraction I'm going to bring up is organized sports, like American football, with a history going back to the first college football game between Rutgers and Princeton on November 6th of 1869, and having a ball shaped like the Vesica Piscis. The Vesica Piscis is the first sacred geometric figure to emerge in the process of creating the flower of life pattern. Football in other places in the world, except for countries like the United States where it is called soccer, had its first ever match on December 19th of 1863 at Mortlake, London, England, between the Barnes Football Club and the Richmond Football Club, and in which the football, or soccer ball, is shaped like the sacred geometric shape of the dodecahedron, also found within the flower of life pattern. The first public basketball game was played in Springfield, Massachusetts on March 11th of 1892, which brings to mind a comparison of the ball of the sport of hoops compared with the hoop configuration of the sacred hoop dance of Native Americans, which is also connected to depicting the flower of life, the creation pattern of the universe. Basketball also provides a great cover for the human giants living amongst us. The last organized sport I would like to bring forward is baseball. The first officially recorded baseball game in the United States took place on the Elysian Fields of Hoboken, New Jersey on June 19th of 1846 between the New York Nine and the New York Knickerbockers. When you look up the meaning of Elysian Fields, it says that it refers to the final resting place of souls of the heroic and virtuous in Greek mythology and religion. I don't know what this means in this context, but I find it interesting to note. For one thing, you have the baseball diamond and the shape of a diamond, which looks like a square turned sideways. A square is the face of a cube, which is also found within the flower of life pattern. I bring in this information about the sacred geometric shapes contained within elements of all of these sports because I believe sacred geometry is being deliberately misused against humanity here. Sporting events serve as a distraction and an addiction in and of themselves, and then you add in the sports fan culture of drinking alcohol at sporting events. And in places like sports bars, you have extra added addictions being promoted and normalized. And as well, you have the promotion of unhealthy, long called junk foods in the concession stands of stadiums and movie theaters. I also suspect that baseball fields, and stadiums for that matter, represent far more on the Earth's grid system than what we are taught about them. I really started thinking about this when I was taking a look at Nashville, Tennessee, at Fort Negley, and noticed that there was a baseball field sandwiched between the Star Fort and railroad yards in Nashville. And as far as stadiums go, these are historic photos of Soldier Field in Chicago, Illinois, looking very much like what is called classical Greco-Roman architecture and stadiums of ancient times, like the Circus Maximus in ancient Rome. This is Soldier Field today, with some of the original colonnaded architecture incorporated into the new stadium. Next, with regards to the subject of how we were put and kept to sleep, I am now going to look at the origins of companies and corporations. I would like to start this subject with the concept of two kinds of takeover bids in the business world, because I think it is a really important concept to understand with regards to what has taken place here. The first is called a friendly takeover bid and occurs when the board of directors from both companies, target and acquirer, negotiate and approve the bid. Then there is the hostile takeover bid, which occurs when an acquiring company seeks to acquire another company, the target company, but the board of directors from the target company has no desire to be acquired by or merged with another company. The two most common strategies used by acquirers in a hostile takeover are a tender offer or a proxy vote. The tender offer is an offer to purchase shares at a premium to the market price. The proxy offer is persuading shareholders of the target company to vote out the existing management. So we have Team Light on one side, who along with the ancient advanced human civilization of Earth, were co-creating the fullest expression of human potential there ever was on Earth. Then we have Team Dark on the other side, comprised of fallen angels and other beings with a negative agenda towards humanity who have been interfering egregiously on Earth. What was Team Dark to do? They were jealous of humanity, greedy, and hungry for power. They wanted to rule over it all, take the wealth for themselves, and control the destiny of humanity for their own benefit. But the problem is in a free will zone like Earth, the human beings who live here have to give their consent to choose whether to follow the light or the dark. The negative beings behind all of this wanted to set up a new god as Lord of this world, Lucifer, and wanted a proxy vote for their hostile takeover. They wanted to persuade enough of humanity to voluntarily accept Lucifer over the creator of the universe. The only way they can accomplish this acceptance, however, is by outright lies, deception, and duplicity, because if people knew the true agenda of these controllers, the majority of humanity would never ever accept this. I believe that these beings with a negative agenda devised a complicated plan to knock humanity off the positive Moorish timeline of higher consciousness in an interdimensional war in order to control humanity, using humans as their tools against the Creator and creation. I see Paradise Lost, the epic poem by John Milton, as historical nonfiction. This poem has a publication date of 1667. As related in the poem, newly banished fallen angels organize, and Satan volunteers to corrupt the newly created earth and God's new and most favored creation, mankind. He goes to the Garden of Eden and basically convinces Eve, by duplicity, to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, making it their fault they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Team Dark definitely doesn't want us to know about what they've been doing without our knowledge or consent, so they tell us without telling us. They are telling us. This particular statue briefly made an appearance at the Arkansas State Capitol building in 2018 to protest the Ten Commandments monument on the Capitol grounds. I bring all this up because it is important to know this is what's been going on here. Humans are inherently sovereign beings. They have gone to all of this trouble because, by universal law, they can't lay a finger on us. They have tricked us into accepting their sovereignty over our own. I will begin this look behind the curtain into corporations and companies with the origins of the petroleum industry. Samuel Keir established America's first oil refinery for making lamp oil in Pittsburgh in 1854. The petroleum industry in the United States began in earnest in 1859 when Edwin Drake found oil on a piece of leased land near Titusville, Pennsylvania, in what is now called Oil Creek State Park. For this reason, Titusville is called the birthplace of the oil industry, and for a number of years, this part of Pennsylvania was the leading oil-producing region in the world. In 1839, John D. Rockefeller Sr. was born in the United States, the progenitor of the wealthy Rockefeller family, and considered to be the wealthiest American of all time. Along with Henry Flagler, an American industrialist and major developer in the state of Florida, Rockefeller founded the Standard Oil Company in 1870. The Standard Oil Company was an American oil-producing, transporting, refining, and marketing company and monopoly, which exists when a specific person or enterprise is the only supplier of a particular commodity. In 1911, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly, ending its history as one of the world's first and largest multinational corporations. This was the former Standard Oil Company building in Lower Manhattan in New York City, said to have been constructed between 1921 and 1928, atop an original building dating from around 1884, and was the headquarters of Standard Oil Trust and successor companies until 1956. The pyramid at the top of the Standard Oil headquarters on the left was said to have been modeled after the mausoleum of Halicarnassus on the right, built for Mausolus, ruler of Caria in Turkey around 350 BC, and called one of the seven wonders of the ancient world. Rockefeller's wealth soared as kerosene and gasoline grew in importance. At his peak, he controlled 90% of all oil. Oil was used in the form of kerosene throughout the country as a light source and heating source until the introduction of electricity, then as a fuel source after the invention of the automobile. There is mounting evidence that there had already been a worldwide free energy system in existence from the original civilization, including electric streetcar systems, which included residential routes like this historic photograph in a Charlotte, North Carolina neighborhood. Electric streetcar systems at one time were in existence everywhere, and not just limited to a few places here and there. Most of them no longer exist. It appears like the petroleum industry was developed in the 1850s in order to provide an energy technology to replace the free energy transportation system of the original civilization and to make money from the control of non-renewable resources. The General Electric Company, or GE, is an American multinational conglomerate that operates through the following segments: aviation, healthcare, power, renewable energy, digital industry, additive manufacturing, venture capital and finance, and lighting. GE was founded in Schenectady, New York, on April 15th of 1892 by Thomas Edison, Elihu Thomson, Edwin Houston, Charles Coffin, and J.P. Morgan, with the merger of the Edison General Electric Company and Thomson Houston Electric. Edison General had been founded as the Edison Electric Light Company in 1878 by Thomas Edison to market his incandescent light bulb, which he was given the credit for inventing in our historical narrative. Thomson Houston Electric was formed in 1882 when Charles Coffin led a group of Lynn, Massachusetts investors and bought out Elihu Thomson's and Edwin Houston's American Electric Company from their New Britain, Connecticut investors in 1882. The Thomas Houston Electric Company moved their operations to a building on Western Street in Lynn, Massachusetts. We are told that in 1888, Thomson Houston Electric implemented the electrification of streetcars in Lynn, which was part of the Lynn and Boston Street Railway, in service since 1854, when it had been powered by mules. The merger of the Edison General Electric Company and the Thomson Houston Electric Company was arranged by J.P. Morgan, an American financier and banker who dominated corporate finance on Wall Street throughout the period of time called the Gilded Age, between the years of 1870 and 1900. He was a driving force behind the wave of industrial consolidation in the United States in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Besides his involvement in the formation of General Electric, he was also behind the formation of the U.S. Steel Corporation and International Harvester, among many other mergers. With regards to U.S. Steel, J.P. Morgan financed the merger of Andrew Carnegie's Carnegie Steel Company, Elbert Gary's Federal Steel Company, and William Henry Moore's National Steel Company in 1901. The new U.S. Steel Company established its headquarters in the Empire Building on Broadway in New York City, said to have been built between 1895 and 1898. And Charles Schwab became the first president of the U.S. Steel Corporation, a position he held for 2 years before becoming president of the Bethlehem Shipbuilding and Steel Company in 1903. International Harvester goes back to the 1830s, when Virginia inventor Cyrus McCormick patented his finalized version of a horse-drawn reaper in 1834. He and his brother subsequently started the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company in Chicago in 1847. We are told their products came onto the market just as the development of railroads offered wide distribution to distant market areas, and the McCormick factory just happened to be right next to railroad tracks. In 1902, the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company merged with the Deering Harvester Company, forming International Harvester. The business lines of the company included primarily agricultural equipment, automobiles, commercial trucks, lawn and garden products, and household equipment. The Deering Harvester Company had been founded in 1874 by William Deering, and he moved the company to Chicago in 1880. William Deering's son James, connected with the Deering-McCormick International Harvester fortune, was said to have built the Via Vizcaya between 1914 and 1922 on Biscayne Bay in the Coconut Grove neighborhood of Miami, Florida. The German inventor Carl Benz created the first gasoline-powered automobile in 1885, the Benz Patent Motorwagen. It was propelled by an internal combustion engine. About 25 of them were built between 1886 and 1893. Henry Ford's first automobile company was the Henry Ford Company, which he started in 1901 and left after less than a year after a dispute with investors with the rights to his name. The first company subsequently became known as the Cadillac Motor Company under new ownership. The Ford Motor Company was financed by 12 investors in 1903 and started producing a few cars a day in its newly converted factory in Detroit on Mack Street. It was where Ford's first automobile, the Model A, was built. In 1904, the Ford Motor Company moved to a new factory on Piquette Avenue in Detroit. This is where the first Model Ts were built. In the next 10 years, the Ford Motor Company would lead the world in the expansion and refinement of the assembly line concept. Henry Ford also brought part production in-house, thereby bringing vertical integration into his company, where the supply chain of a company is owned by the company. Ford moved operations into the Highland Park factory in 1910 and introduced the first moving assembly line there in 1913. The introduction and refinement of the assembly line facilitated the mass production of new cars, which in turn made the purchase of a new car affordable for most people. It is interesting to note that pioneer filmmaker Thomas Ince and Henry Ford were both pioneers of assembly line production and vertical integration in their respective industries during the very same time period of the early 1900s. In summary, I am seeing great wealth and power being consolidated into the hands of a few in a hostile takeover of the Earth's grid system and humanity, and a whole new culture being created to control us through addictions, distractions, and money, and that they do not have humanity's best interest at heart. Those that heretofore have been in control of the world in which we live deviously figured out a way to keep us asleep by this new culture they created, and they have been getting filthy rich at our expense because we have been paying for our own poisoning with our addictions, paying for our own mind control programming with distractions, and keeping us in consumerism mode to enrich corporate interests, and ultimately financing our own destruction. They have always feared the great awakening of humanity, and thus threw everything that they could at us to prevent it from happening and keep us asleep so we would never know what hit us. But no matter what they do, they can't keep it from happening. Among many other things, they lost control of the narrative, no matter how hard they try to get it back.